Hello and welcome to the Gonzales Mitchell Show. I'm Clay Mitchell.
And I'm Patrick Gonzales.
And today, Patrick and I have the privilege of talking to Anthony Darby. Anthony is CEO of Peninsula Consulting, and he is one of the most successful cannabis entrepreneurs here in Maryland. Anthony, welcome to our show.
Thank you guys so much for having me on today. I appreciate it.
Now,
Absolutely.
the legalization for recreational marijuana, medical marijuana, is a new phenomenon in Maryland. Tell us how you got started, what gave the idea, and where your operation is located.
Yeah, sure. So I originally got started in the industry in 2016 when Maryland first passed legislation and adopted. It was the Natalie M. La Parade bill that grandfathered and brought to play um, medical cannabis in Maryland. Truthfully, I was kind of in between roles. The company that was working for had just recently been acquired, and I was at a point of after having my first daughter, where I really wanted to. This is kind of a newer age thing, but I actually wanted to get some enjoyment from my work. It wasn't just about going and getting a check and going home. It's like I actually want to go and do something. And at that time, I was commuting from Eldersburg, Maryland, to Northern Virginia. And
Wow.
unless you're passionate about what you're doing, that drive is brutal and will really take the life out of anyone. So, kind of in
There
this
ain't
sort.
that much. There ain't that much passion on this earth to drive from Eldersburg to Northern Virginia.
I hear you. Or a paycheck, honestly, which is why I went there. It wasn't the passion; it was to chase a big paycheck in DC, and I was getting that, but just not getting any satisfaction. So, along with my two former college roommates and a pharmacist that we had joined up with, we self-authored and wrote our own application. So a lot of folks spent, most folks were spending six figures at that time to submit an application. And we spent $5,500 out of pocket and we won. And that was a merit-based application. We were super happy. It was a 146-page kind of RFP style process. And we won one of the licenses in Senate District 37, which is here in Salisbury. Promptly opened Peninsula Alternative Health. We raised between friends and family $188,000
Wow.
and opened up in a former little animal hospital. We literally that Gander Mountain had gone out of business. We got display cases that used to have guns in them and put pot in them. Kind of crazy. We did things very, very grassroots, and we were the first dispensary, along with four others, to open on December 5th in 2017. And we built up a really large business to a point that at our largest, when it was still medical in Maryland, there were days that we were seeing over 1,000 patients a day.
Holy
So,
moly.
yeah.
Uh,
So, go ahead.
you don't need a prescription anymore to come in to your store.
No, so as of July 1st, and just to be clear, so we built that business up, and in 2022, for a variety of different reasons and timing, we exited out of that business. We sold Peninsula Alternative Health. It then is now controlled by TerrAscend, which is one of the largest companies in the world for cannabis. Um, and then at that time, I kind of transitioned into doing consulting, and of course, adult use came July 1st of 2022. 2023, sorry. And that sparked a lot of change, and that now opened up from something that you had to go through a process and kind of to declare yourself a medical patient, and in some ways compromise other rights like purchasing firearms, which is why I'm currently not still a patient in the state of Maryland. Um, there was concerns around your employer finding out, or being used in a custody battle. There's a lot of concerns. So I was very grateful that in July 1st the bill had evolved and it now became adult use, which a lot of people call rec, but I like to think of it just more as an open opportunity. And it's been like that now for, almost 2 years. This July will be our second year of adult use. So there was a lot of work to be done, a lot of changes. It was a lot different, going from only being medically focused, and certainly for us, we had a clinical director in on a daily basis, a Pharm D. Like we took our role pretty seriously, and the state certainly seemed to appreciate that.
But with the change going to adult use, one of the theories I think behind it was that that would decrease crime instead of going to a drug dealer in the neighborhood who could set any price they want. You, on the other hand, have to, and correct me if I'm wrong, you have to make sure that the person's of legal age, you have a license you can lose, and you have to run it above board. And it just like a regular business, it's not behind a building in an alley somewhere. You actually have a storefront, correct?
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's true. I think as long as cannabis is is affordable, and when I say affordable, is it can't be more expensive, to purchase cannabis legally. So much so that folks can go to the street. So the reason why I mention that is because what we've seen in states like California and others where they put high taxes on cannabis, the streets still win. People will still go to the street. But in Maryland, we've seen a huge decrease in folks getting cannabis from the black market. And not that it doesn't happen, but certainly a lot less. And our businesses are some of the most highly regulated businesses in the country. The MCA inspectors are, the truth is that most of them are, and many of them are former state troopers. They're law enforcement officers at nature. They are in the business of enforcing the law. So when they come in and inspect our premises, they're literally able to pull up a list, and we may have over 1,000 products, and they'll say, it says that you have 2/8 of this one strain. We want to see them in your inventory. We want to see it right now. And if you can't show them those two strains in your inventory at demand, you can be fined for diversion, and those fines can get up to six figures real quick.
Wow.
So it's interesting because when just anecdotally, when we're recruiting for employees, the people that are most excited about pot are the first ones to show up. And then you got to tell them about how unfun it is to work in the store because it's regulated. You can't come in stoned. You have to be, on your P's and Q's. We are a drug and alcohol free workplace like everywhere else. I'm like, oh man, I thought it was going to be different. I'm like, no, it's not.
Yeah. You can't come in and run a liquor store and drink the inventory. I'll
Right.
get
It's the
that.
same thing.
Now, one of the things, Anthony, that is of concern to a lot of people is fentanyl getting into marijuana and other drugs. A high school kid goes out and buys some marijuana from God knows who. It could be laced with fentanyl, and a lot of people have died from that. What does your industry do to make sure that that does not happen or get into your inventory? Sort of like the chain of custody of the plant.
So we actually have full chain of custody. So from the time that plant is a seed to the time that it's in your joint, we can track it from seed to sale. Okay. And then there's also in Maryland some of the most rigorous lab testing in all of the country. So every single product gets a certificate of authenticity, a C of A form. They're testing for certainly not just like fentanyl and very harmful things, but even things like um, metals and microbials and pesticides. And these are things that, the fentanyl thing, quite frankly, in any state legal program, that's all going to be covered because of the way that the lab testing is done. And that is probably the biggest thing that in fear that I have for products that come off of the street, or even quite frankly, in these vape shops or kind of bodega style places where they're selling products marked like edibles, but there's something in there that's giving you that effect. And if there's no lab testing or there's no proof of what it is, then that makes me highly suspect. So I think it's important to pay attention to that. But even more so, the more that we learn is just like with our food, if you use pesticides in your flower and then don't cure it properly, then you're smoking those pesticides, and those pesticides are going to be very harmful, far more harmful than the cannabis. So I really appreciate the fact that Maryland has such rigorous testing, and that any product that you buy, you can literally use the QR code and call the manufacturer, and they can give you a full 4 or 5 page report of everything that's in that chemically.
Patrick, you're biting at the bit. What do you got to say?
Yeah. Well, when Anthony was talking about getting a job there, I kind of all of a sudden, hey, that sounds kind of neat. And then I kind of reflected back on when I was hired to be a general manager at a brothel one time, and I thought, oh my God, I have found my perfect job. But soon after, I discovered I wasn't allowed to eat at work, so I got disillusioned and left, and that's how I got into politics. So, but no,
You see what
I
I'm gonna.
don't.
You see what I put up with?
Wow.
But no, what I'm fascinated by about this is I grew up. I started school in the elementary school in the early 1960s, and I remember things like Reefer Madness, the thing produced back in the 1930s when they didn't have and just to watch how things have evolved literally over 60 years. I'm just kind of fascinated by it. And I'm learning as much as the audience is right now, and I love it. So,
Yeah.
the one question I had, Anthony, is the price regulated? So, in other words, is there a certain amount you have to charge, or how does that work?
You can't do anything for free. But other than that, no, there is no price setting. There's not even a recommendation by the state on how we should price.
So it's competitive from dispensary to dispensary. It's competitive, almost like having gas stations, on opposite corners, and they're competing for same type of thing. Okay, I got you.
That's a great point you bring up, Patrick, because it's like that in some places and others it's not. So, in a place like the Eastern Shore, there's still areas where you can drive 45, 50 minutes and not get to a dispensary, right? I don't know if you guys know this, but one of my most recent projects is I'm opening a store in Millington for a group, one of the new social equity applicants out there. And the town and area is really excited because there just hasn't been a dispensary besides the Centerville one ever. So, but in other places like Timonium on York Road, you can have 5 dispensaries in 5 miles, right? So they become highly competitive. You see pricing, promotion. You see all of that having a lot more impact into the business model than like some of the rural stores where things are more spread out. But it's a highly competitive market. We've seen good price. We saw some price compression happening before adult use, and we've actually seen that rectify back up. And the market seems to be feeling pretty stable right now. The demand seems to be, at bay with supply. Folks don't seem to be not, at one point, dispensaries were running out of product and then there became too much product. But right now we seem to be at a pretty good medium where I think folks have a good understanding of where the market is right now and kind of where it's going to go over the next few months.
You mentioned licensing, the new store in Millington, and the social equity aspect of it. What's the process? You just can't go and say, "Hey, state of Maryland, I want to open up a dispensary down the road here and get one." It's not like I can just get a regular business license. What's the process for doing that?
No, I appreciate it. I was hoping we were going to talk about this a little bit. So
Yeah.
there's the state had put in place a framework to have a couple lotteries. The first one being exclusively open to social equity applicants. And the idea was that unlike my application, as I mentioned, was like 146 pages. It was literally a full-time job for 2 months. This most recent lottery, $5,000 and 30 minutes to fill out the form. And if you meet the qualifications, you got in the lottery. The problem that I'm seeing as a consultant in the market is, unlike the group that I'm working with in Millington that are highly qualified. The CEO is a pharmacist. She's got a good group of friends and family helping her out as well, bring that business to market. But many of them being folks that have won this lottery, they have no capital, they have no experience, and the state has put them in a way that they're not able to bring on capital or partnerships or like a managing folks to help them manage the business. So that they're struggling. They're not going anywhere, and the state's going to have to really think about what the intent of this is, because as I'm looking at it right now, I would predict that in a year from now, you won't see, 8 out of 10 of those licenses per category still won't be to market.
Now, will those licenses be sold, or they have to go through a brand new process?
The state is not allowing any type of a transfer, even for you to, like, let's say that, you wanted to bring on a partner at 49%, and that partner's going to give you the capital and they're going to help you run the business. The state won't allow you to do that. Yeah. You're not allowed to give that type of an equity transfer. And I'm not sure that I understand the intent and why they're trying to put some protections in place, because there was a lot of the licenses that transferred in the beginning, but it's almost like handcuffs for these folks, and the fact that they have this dream that they want to pursue, but there's no one in the capital is hard to come by, right? We're not going to a bank. We're not getting a loan. Everything that we do is very expensive. Like it's a really tough hill to ask someone to walk up if they don't have experience or cannabis. And it's sad. It makes me sad, honestly, that a lot of these folks thought that they won a lottery ticket, and it's not going to be that.
I was going to ask you, because I know that there's still federal restrictions in place for all of this. How does commerce happen? You can't walk down to the bank, I guess, and make a deposit and write checks and all that. How does it work?
I can't even get a mortgage on a house for myself unless I go to a cannabis specific bank.
Wow.
Which, thank goodness, in Maryland we have Shore Bank. Ironically, is the cannabis bank in Maryland. They have the more market share for anyone, and they've made things a lot more real for us. So when I started the business, you guys will appreciate this, we didn't have access to a bank account. So we went down to one of our local banks and took out 2 safety deposit boxes, the biggest ones they had. And we were moving hundreds of thousands of dollars around in book bags and safety deposit boxes, going to the post office every day, Monday through Friday, getting $7,000 of money orders, because that's what they would allow us to get without having to, fill out all the paperwork. It was absolute chaos. And then finally, we were able to develop the relationship with Shore, and it changed everything. So we accept debit cards in most dispensaries nowadays. It's not all cash only, but when I wanted to chime in when you said, how do you do commerce? Well, you certainly don't do it interstate.
Gotcha.
Because that's the gray area that turns black and white. So the reason that we're able to exist in the world and not fear being arrested, is because as long as we don't violate interstate commerce, then we're only applicable to Maryland law. But the minute that I would then try to interact with Delaware or Virginia, now you're federal, now you're RICO, now things get rough. So, you have operators that have businesses in Maryland and Pennsylvania, and they could highly need a product or something in Pennsylvania, but they can't ship. There's no warehouse. There's no spoken hub distribution model. Every state is different. Every state business has to be applicable to that state law.
We don't want those Yankees coming across the Mason-Dixon line anyway, do we?
I guess not, man.
No way. But it sounds to me, Anthony, I mean, you just explained an interesting aspect. So, like, in other words, let me see if I have this right. Like a Bank of America, which operates in many states, is precluded from getting involved because of the interstate commerce aspect. Is that true? Or
They're precluded from getting involved because they're not going to let any money touch their depository institution that comes from cannabis.
Gotcha. So, I mean, my point was, as you're talking about this thing, explaining, you got to, if you want to get into this, and it does sound, that was my dream back in the 70s when I graduated from high school, was to do this kind of stuff and have fun. But you got to be on top of just having the dream, as you kind of touched on with people that have won certain rights to do it. You better be on top of a lot of business aspects of running a business, because if not, you're destined. You don't have a shot. It sounds like, and it sounds like the way it's constructed now doesn't necessarily deal with all those different elements that are in play as far as becoming a successful operation.
Yeah, I think we're going to need to see some progress from the legislature for us to empower the rest of these folks to be able to get a path to market. And certainly hope they do that before they issue any more licenses, which they have the ability to do in the upcoming months. So we'll see what happens.
Now, the state of Maryland gets their piece of the action too, because they collect a tax on it. How much is that tax, and how is that, I guess, transmitted to the state for them to spend?
Yeah, so right now it's a 9% tax total, which is not horrible. Honestly, I think it's a decent place to land. I would hate to see obviously it's being proposed that to go up. And again, I think my fear is that if you continue to make it more expensive, then all of a sudden the street has value again. The state and both the city in which that business are in both benefit. So, this is like a really great opportunity in a place like Millington, where they got a couple of projects going on with the new senior center, a new police station. Like, there's dollars that are being spent in town right now. And now this dispensary next to the hardware store and the tailgate market will be now one of the top 3 businesses in all of Millington, but really delivering a decent tax differential back to the town. And that was the great thing for us, was the town was really eager for that. So they were really supportive during our process, and we're right next to City Hall. So we wanted to make sure that we were in good graces.
Well, Anthony, I'm sorry to say, by the look of the clock on the wall, our time here is winding down. I want to have you back on again. This is a fascinating subject. It's so new and it's ever evolving. And we want to have you back on, say, after the legislative session, to update us on what happened there, especially with the raising of the cannabis tax. But
Absolutely.
until that time, Anthony, I'm afraid it's time for us to say goodbye, Patrick.
Goodbye, Patrick.
Goodbye, Patrick.
Goodbye, Patrick and Anthony. Thank you so much for joining us here today. I learned a lot from this, and we'll have you back on soon.
Thank
I
you.
did too, and thank you, Anthony.